Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Disaster Risk Reduction Pathways Project Final Steering Committee meeting. I am Sahar Safaie from Sage on Earth Consulting, have been the lead contractor for the project. DRR Pathways project is led by NRCan and funded by Canadian Safety and Security Program. First thing, I want to acknowledge that the land that I live, work, and play and learn is on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people. Today we are going to have a small group. The invitation has gone to the steering committee members, so we can keep it comfortable and casual. Please open your videos. It helps a lot for the speakers, but also for the audience to feel more connected. And feel free to write a greeting in the chat for your colleagues. Take a moment to change your name and add your affiliation to your Zoom name. We are recording this and we will make it available on the website. Use the chat for questions, comments during the presentations. Our speakers will be able to answer your questions once they are finished in the chat. And if we have time at the end of the session, we will make sure we open it up for more kind of audio in exchange for questions and comments. I am co-chairing or co-hosting the event today with Nikki Hastings from NRCan, Geohazards Risk Project Lead at Geological Survey of Canada, NRCan. Without any further ado, actually, before that, I just want to reiterate the objectives of our meeting today, which we want to go through the project achievements, get an overview of all the different project components with special emphasis on the technical research and modeling components, and the contributions of the project to enhancing disaster risk, understanding disaster risk and risk management. But also, this is our last steering committee meeting after 2.5 years and a year and few months of COVID time that we haven't seen each other in person. We want to celebrate our collective efforts during the past 2.5 years, but also all that we have learned in changing the way we think about disaster risk and risk management, thinking of it in a more systemic way. So I hope we can stay in the celebration mood. We wish we could have this in person with champagne, but here we are, a celebration in Zoom. So I would pass to Catherine Forge to basically officially open the meeting, as she has been the chair of the steering committee and a huge supporter of the project right from the beginning until now. She's the executive director of the Disaster Risk Reduction at Emergency BC. Catherine, please.
Thanks, Sahar. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Catherine Forge, and Sahar's already provided my introduction, but I've been honored to be the chair of the steering committee for the past 2.5 years, and also honored to be calling in from the traditional territories of the Wasanic people, of which I am a guest. And this project has been so important to advancing disaster risk reduction by improving our understanding of disaster risk, understanding investments to reduce disaster risk, and also considering disaster risk governance. And it's also been very important because it supports the direction that we're moving as a province, both with the advancement of our new legislation, which is soon to be released, but also with the community that's established around disaster risk reduction. And that's something that we've certainly seen that was in existence before the creation of this project, but has certainly expanded, and that community has expanded over the last 2.5 years through the efforts of all of you. So, and with COVID, you know, this past year has certainly been tough for many of us. But one of the aspects of COVID that's underscores, I would say, the importance of this project is the importance of science and data-driven observations that was elevated through this experience. And that's something that goes to demonstrate the importance of the science and research that has been done by our partners here. So certainly I'm very excited to learn more of that science and research today and Monday. Unfortunately, I can't be here Monday, but Ken Craig will be here. And thanks very much, Sahar. It's yeah, definitely an honor, and happy to be here for the final closing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine. So now I'll start by giving an overview of the project vision and the overview of the components, basically the overview of the design and the components. So there were three major objectives for the project. The first was increasing capability to model and understand systemic risk recovery and resilience. So this is risk modeling. The second was enabling evidence-based disaster risk reduction. This is more about using risk information for disaster risk reduction, policy design, and decision-making that must happen throughout that process. And the third is strengthening governance of disaster risk information and risk management through knowledge exchange and engagements. At the heart of the project is the exchange and connection between the science and policy partners. So the project started under the leadership of GSC with the technical partners that you see, UBC, UVic, GEM, ERI, and ICLR, and the policy and planning partners, NBC, City of Vancouver, DRDC, the same, Fraser Basin Council, CAS, Metro Vancouver, and BCFSA. And this exchange, continuous exchange and engagement of the two parties, the two sides of the aisle, has been at the heart of the project. I want to reiterate and remind you of the vision of the project, which has been the basis for the design of the components, but also want to emphasize that it was the vision that is still valid. Like, it's a vision that looks into the future, and there's a lot more to be done to get there. But I also can't talk about the vision without talking about the visionary. So you all know Murray Journey, who recently retired from Geological Survey of Canada. He is the main brain behind the design of the project. So basically, the vision and the design is based on decades of his hard work, innovative thinking, and caring engagement with both the scientific bodies and policy and planning bodies. I think he really resisted, and I'm impressed by his strong will to resist the temptations of joining this meeting. Despite my many different efforts, he still gave his input to many of the speakers who kindly agreed to carry the heavy lift of presenting his work, although all the speakers have been engaged and working on that work as well. So basically, the project was designed, I think one of the main characteristics of it was designed around people, their interactions, based on the fact, the very important fact that people are the ones who shake things and move things forward with their expertise, with their capacities, and their intentions. So we started with amazing group of partners and team members. These are the set of photos of the members from January 2019. Few people have moved on to different positions, still working very closely and supporting us very closely throughout the project. And the partnerships and memberships expanded. We can say that today, on all the components of the project, we have more than 250 people who have come in and out or have come in and stayed on various components of the project, including the final report. So I've been trying past few weeks to think what is the best way to tell the story of the design of the project in a very simple way. I don't think still I succeeded in making it simple, because the concept of systemic risk and then moving into risk reduction scenarios and actually getting into policy risk reduction is a complex concept. But I have made an attempt and used and reused some of Murray's slides who basically have thought of the design of the project in 3 stages, especially the technical components of the project. Stage 1, understanding the baseline risk levels. So this is basically risk modeling, and the image you see is earthquake risk modeling that will provide understanding of physical damage to the buildings, loss of life and injuries, economic losses, understanding disproportionate impacts on most vulnerable people through socioeconomic vulnerability assessments, and the cascading failures and the consequences due to disruption to critical infrastructure and businesses. So the project does get into all of these layers through different components of it, and many of these have been integrated in either as pilot or actually into some of the final products. I do encourage you to watch the Black Swan over Vancouver event at URBC. In fact, I encourage you to go back and encourage your networks to also use the amazing resource that is available on variety of the topics, especially related to the project on URBC. But this specific concept is under that event. And most of the components of the project are under this stage, are under modeling the current status of risk. So either input components such as building and critical infrastructure exposure data sets, vulnerability modeling, and then the actual modeling, building, socioeconomic vulnerability, and the critical infrastructure. We are going to hear from many of the researchers today and few on Monday. There is one component that we are going to hear today about is the dynamic risk modeling, which looked into future risk trends using the historical trends. So all of these components in stage 1 help understanding the risk levels in today's situation. But we need to also understand, what if we come up with a risk reduction scenario? What if we come up with a policy such as retrofitting or certain change in land use planning or building certain dikes, how that would change the risk level? So this is the stage 2, and a couple of the models incorporated some risk reduction scenarios. That's earthquake risk model with lower vulnerability scenarios, which we're going to hear from Tegan about that, and the critical infrastructure restoration that has looked into some of the hardening options and how that changes restoration process. The third stage is, now that we understand the current risk level, have some ideas of how various risk reduction options changes the future of risk and resilience in our society. What does that mean, and how does that help with choosing risk reduction policies and development policies? Far more complex part of these 3 stages. And we have 2 of the components, project components, that explored this element. One with the City of Vancouver exploring retrofitting options. And the second is we piloted basically using a digital stakeholder engagement tool, again using City of Vancouver retrofitting policy. This graph, I love it. I think Jackie and Murray worked on it. And I think the concept of moving from where we are today to reduce basically the damage levels, but also reduce the time for recovery. A society like Canada and BC, we will recover even from the biggest disasters, but it's a matter of how long it will take. So the concept of recovery time is another, I think, but another amazing concept that was introduced throughout the project. So the session on URBC, relevant to this one, is transferring earthquake risk information into plans for resilience communities. And last but not least, the last objective, which is about strengthening governance through knowledge exchange, is another critical component of the project, which also, again, I would want to call it, in a sense, visionary, especially coming from a scientific body and coming from a scientist that designed this work. Because all of this risk modeling and technical work would not reach the final stage if the engagements and knowledge sharing doesn't happen, and if the products are not accessible, useful, reusable, and understandable by the ultimate users. So few of the components of the project are relevant to this. Risk profiler, we are going to hear about it today. Risk data management platform, we'll hear about it on Monday. Understanding Risk BC Symposium, which we had it last year, 20 events, the Resilient Pathways Report, and the BC DRR Hub. These are the components that throughout the year we have worked on it and have contributed and are relevant to strengthening governance of risk information and risk reduction. With that, I pass it on to Nikki.